So the Buddha, our teacher, the Buddha, referring to Shakyamuni Buddha, teacher of this era. In Buddhism, the eras are very long. And time opens on both ends, beginningless and endless, because it'd be hard to find where would it start, what would have started it. We don't have a first cause, we have many causes. The Buddha taught two things, he said. I teach suffering and the end of suffering. Good enough. Suffering is to be known deeply, as we were just engaged in. The cause of suffering is to be abandoned, but we have to know what it is before we abandon it. The Buddha taught it arises in your own mind, nowhere else. We can see that in a certain commonplace way about reactions. Something occurs, some people freak out about it, and some feel happy about it, and some don't care. Same thing, the thing, whatever it is going on. But it doesn't have any inherent suffering in its nature, because some people look at that thing and say, I'm glad that happened. I'm happy. Others look and say, that's the most terrible thing that ever happened in the whole world. And others say, I didn't even notice it. Same thing, same set of conditions. So the suffering arises over here in the reaction to it. At least that's what the Buddha taught, and he also taught, check it out. See if that's true. Don't accept it because somebody sits somewhere and says it. Suffering is to be known. Causes of suffering are to be abandoned. That would be what are called kleshas and obscurations in our mind, habit patterns that cause the suffering. There's an end to suffering. Yay! As Bill said, we wouldn't want to contemplate it so deeply if we thought that's all there is to think about it endlessly and get bummed out and depressed and So there's an end, a complete, total end. It's called nirvana. It's got lots of names, but total, complete peace can be had by you, by me. How amazing. Not just by some exalted being, because as Lama Michael constantly reminds us, more often lately, I think, some person met the Buddha, looked at him, had that experience I was talking about, like, wow, this human being's doing something really different, looks pretty happy, looks peaceful, not happy like giddy, but peaceful, centered, loving, accepting. So that person said, we can pretend it's a woman for a change, said, what's the difference between you and me? Something looks different with you. What's the difference between you and me? And the Buddha said to her, no difference. That could be a koan, couldn't it? To just sit with the rest of your life. What does that mean? But the Buddha went on and said, no difference. Except I understand, the Buddha said, that I'm the Buddha and you don't know that you are. No other difference. Easy to say, but there's a path to finding that out, to seeing it, to seeing it. So we have this Buddha nature within us. It's the thing that keeps saying, on one level, must be something better than this, but not grabbing at the worldly things, but saying, it's the, what's that one line? There's a great prayer I like. It's your sensitivity for truth. You have a sensitivity for truth. We might call it a bullshit detector. That's the other side of the coin. The bullshit detector says, okay, that's BS. I'm going away from that. But it's a sensitivity for a truth to go toward. That's Buddha nature. The pain we automatically feel when we see someone suffering, that's Buddha nature. Imagine if you could look at suffering and not care. Which we do. I mean, we insulate ourselves. But if we never ever cared, that's the deadened Buddha nature. So Buddha nature just shows up all the time. We can be very happy that we're disturbed by suffering. Very happy that we don't want it. We don't want it for ourselves or others. That's an aspect of our Buddha nature. So there's a path. That's the third noble truth, but fourth noble truth. There's suffering, cause of suffering, end of suffering, and a path. So now the whole Tonglen is in that fourth part, the path. It's a practice toward gaining complete freedom from suffering for self and others. So there's so many teachings, as I said. They say 84,000, but we're going to look at something called the Four Immeasurables. They're in your book, but I won't be reading them exactly that way, so you might want to just listen and take this home and read it later. So sometimes they're taught in different orders. In the book, they are taught as immeasurable loving kindness. Let's see if the words are the same, because everywhere you go, they might be a little different. Immeasurable loving kindness, immeasurable compassion, immeasurable joy, and immeasurable equanimity. I'm really into equanimity these days. So, and not just for that reason, but the Dalai Lama, when he, the text that I learned Chenrezig off of, originating with him through Lama Zopa Rinpoche, through my teacher, Venerable Chitran, started with immeasurable equanimity. So first we have to look at that word, immeasurable. Cannot be measured. Wow. So vast, cannot be measured. What makes it immeasurable is that with the four immeasurables, there's kind of two aspects. One is that due to our bodhicitta, which is within and begins to manifest, the Buddha awakened mind, when we start seeing no difference between self and others, and we also hold that beings are also not to be measured. Western science likes to measure things, but I think they've even carved out like a square foot of earth in a random place and tried to measure every being in that. You can look it up on Google, it's funny. It's huge amounts of beings in a square foot of ground, like huge, probably close to limitless right there. I doubt that they're really measuring every single thing in there. But at any rate, immeasurable, you could start there with a square foot of ground, just there. inside our bodies, even modern science, immeasurable beings in here that are moving things around, bacterias and what are all those things that probiotics try and help you have more of. And those are sentient in the sense of if you could isolate them and set them out and put freezing things on them or burning things on them, they would want to move away from it. So we're just surrounded, immersed in this immeasurability, but we don't pay much attention to it because we're paying attention to this. Me, mine. Most important thing in the vast universe. As the Dalai Lama says, on one hand you would put the 7.5 billion humans, just humans, and then you. And say, what's the thing I pay attention to all day? That's how the confusion is. We get happier, he says, and I experience it a little, if I pay attention to some of these 7.5 billion. Okay, so this immeasurability, because we apply it to all those limitless beings, we don't leave anyone out. We include friends, family. That's easy, right? Well, on certain days. Some days my friends, they don't do what I say and want, so maybe I move them in the category of difficult. But generally, friends and family, pretty easy to include in our compassion, loving kindness, and joy. Difficult people, maybe just avoid them and think that's equanimity. It's not. That's a form of anger, actually, avoidance. In Buddhism called aversion. So attachment, we get that. My little 2.5-year-old grandson, yesterday, so cute. And he loves Grandma Zopa, and so I love him. I said, I have to go home now. He said, no. And we feel very pleased with that, and that's good. It's fine. But this, limitless, then I need to think of, I'll tell you what I did when I was very, very upset. Sorry to bring up any political thing, but it's a good example about the election and who got elected. I started thinking, I need to see this family as human. So I found a website, and it showed Ivana Trump's little baby crawling across the carpet in the Oval Office. I just loved it. It was like a baby. So these are the ways we have to work with someone who's in difficult or enemy territory in our patterned mind, and then go, no, fully human, deserving of love, deserving of freedom from suffering, just like me. That's the equanimity part. Just like me. No difference on the level of being human, headed towards death, headed towards aging, suffering without any wish. Just like me that way, and wishing so much for happiness, and just like me, going about it the way that leads to more suffering. We're so alike. That's the equanimity piece. So alike. So it sets the basis for us to wish someone loving kindness who seems difficult to us. By the way, we seem difficult to someone else. And by the way, someone we think is really difficult is someone else's beloved. Amazing. Amazing. I'm still like, really? Beloved? So this is the contemplation of equanimity. So let's do a few minutes of this again, a guided meditation. So get a good, comfortable way of sitting. Have a few breaths to just calm the body and mind down. Just relax. So while we contemplate, just remember, we're not trying to do anything but contemplate. There's no right or wrong outcome to this, no right or wrongness in the method. Whatever shows up for you is just perfect. The key is to, just like in our calm abiding, just see it. You don't have to push it away, you don't have to grab at it, just see it. Just let it be in your mind till it moves through itself, by itself. So you can imagine 3 people in front of you. They're sitting in a very equidistant row right in front of you. Have one of them be someone that you feel very warm-hearted toward. A friend, teacher, whatever. You already know you like them. They like you. Maybe there's little bumps in the relationship, but basically it's really quite good. So get that person very clearly there. They're not doing anything, they're just sitting there. Now the second person, this is a person you feel, let's say a stranger. You see them maybe. You can imagine someone on the street, or maybe there actually is a stranger, your postal carrier, or someone who you see at the grocery store, but just someone you don't know. You don't feel animosity toward, you kind of don't feel much of anything towards, you feel neutral. So just imagine such a person sitting next to the one you feel warm-hearted toward. And then the third person comes in and sits down, and this is a person for whom you feel some aversion. Maybe fear, maybe dislike, but definitely aversion, maybe even anger toward, and have that person be there too. Now, ask yourself this question: where do my feelings toward these 3 come from? And look everywhere. Look all around in the scene. Where do your feelings toward them come from? Now, even you don't have an answer to that, as though there's an answer, imagine the person labeled stranger. you find out has done something that is really righteous in the world, really good, you get a text that tells you this person saved someone's life at great cost to him or herself. Now sit with that. See what happens with your feelings toward that one. See what happens. No judging, just see it. Now, look toward the one that you label difficult or enemy or don't like. Now you get a message that this one also has done something admirable that you never knew about. Saved a life, or gave a lot of money to a charity that you support. Did a great kindness in the world. And watch what happens to your sense toward that person. And again, ask yourself, where is all this feeling and thinking happening toward these ones? Is it outside of myself? Is it in them? Is it in me? Where can I find it? We're not looking for a definitive answer. The answer is in the questioning. And now let's look at our loved one, that one we feel warm-hearted toward. And remember something they did that hurt our feelings. Or something they did that you know about, which was mean, not skillful, harmful, caused suffering in the world. Just look at that, because everyone does those, but just look. And again, look at what happens to your reaction to that one. Not with judgment, just with seeing. And now we look at all three again together. Your loved one, the stranger, the difficult one. Looking at all of them, noticing the changes that occur in your mind and heart, then just looking. See what rises. rest in what rises and drop all thoughts, or at least let them just float by. So dropping the contemplation, even dropping the visualization, just being where you are at this moment. So that's one of the contemplations on equanimity. And the more we can do these, the sense of whatever rises, possibly in your meditation it was, possibly, you will know, I won't, a sense of evenness between these. All humans make mistakes, beloved, enemy, wrong, right, do good, don't do good, a more evenness. But you don't need to try for that. The point is to do the practice over and over and see what happens, because what I saw happen for myself early in these practices was, I kind of know what the outcome's supposed to be, so I jumped there. And then that's actually not doing the practice. It's a nice thing. It can build toward it. The practice is the seeing what happens for you as you contemplate those, which might be something like, let me give an example, like I had it happen a little bit just now. Oh yeah, the enemy I find out he did something really good. Fake news. Well then you have to look at that. I mean, if that's what rises up, look at it. Oh, look at my cynicism. Look at how I can't imagine that person doing anything good. Look at, do I actually think there's a single human in the world who's never done anything kind, never done anything good? There were people who loved Hitler and who loved Duarte in the Philippines, who kills people without trials, and there's a reason they do. That person's their parent, or their brother, or been kind to them in some way. That person has Buddha nature. So you use the practice to see what's in the way of me getting to, is that making sense? The not jumping to the nice Buddhist conclusion, I'm supposed to feel equanimous toward these three, so I will. And therefore the practice doesn't touch your heart and nothing changes. That makes sense? Okay, good. Okay, so we're going to touch on the other three immeasurables, and then we're going to have lunch for an hour in silence. Hopefully, if you can stay here, that will be better for your mind. There's soup over there. 2 friends have brought. I think Carolyn and, did you bring soup today? And Cynthia, thank you. So if you haven't brought lunch, there's that and the snacks. If you go out, it's okay if you really need to, but just watch what happens to your mind, because there's no way to step out of here without a lot of stimulus. Even you order a lunch in a lunch place, that's a lot of stimulus. But that could be a practice. If you need to go out, just watch that. And after lunch, we will have time for Q&A on the morning. So bring back your question. But right now, let's take a look at these other immeasurables for the next few minutes. So the immeasurable loving kindness is distinguished from immeasurable compassion. And I meet with people, and there's confusion between those two. So I'm just going to say the main distinction. Immeasurable loving kindness is the wish for others to be happy. Two kinds of happiness: worldly happiness, food, clothing, shelter, medicine, food, good job, friends, house, all that, okay? The other kind of wish for happiness is the wish for them to have a meaningful spiritual path, might be a way, since we don't make a wish that everybody be Buddhist, since that would be a silly wish. But a wish that they have a meaningful, even the word spiritual is kind of difficult there, but a wish that they would find a way to live their lives that in a meaningful way with the deeper happiness of touching on their deepest nature, their deepest goodness, let's call it, that they would know their deepest goodness and live in it. So that kind of happiness, that's what we wish for when we're doing the immeasurable loving kindness. The immeasurable compassion is the opposite side of the coin, the wish to be free from suffering, from every kind of suffering, every kind. Worldly suffering, mental suffering, physical suffering, all the parts Bill had us look at, the ouch kind of suffering of mental and physical pain. The suffering of change, like even the moment, as he said, we grasp at something, it's so beautiful, I wish it could last forever. Suffering because it ain't gonna. It's going flop. Might not even be here Sunday. But you see, in that grasping, we start suffering, even with something pleasurable. The minute we have pleasure, we start suffering because we want it to last, and it's not gonna. And so then we don't really fully enjoy it, right? If we just said, I know it won't last, it's so beautiful in this moment, though. Different. So that's the compassion, is the wish to be free of suffering. And then we have immeasurable joy. Remember, immeasurable is because this is applied to everyone. We don't just send loving kindness to the ones we like in the room. It's kind of like in grade school where they made you give a Valentine to everyone. At least the nuns did. You couldn't get away with, I'm not giving one to Bobby because he hurt me on the recess playground. No, you got to give a Valentine to everyone. It's almost back to that. That's the measurable loving kindness. The measurable joy is has a lot to do with jealousy. When we see someone do, even though we want so much goodness in the world, and we want the end of suffering, and we want happiness, someone does something good, and we go, not good enough. I wish I had done it. They're getting attention, I'm not. You see, we even steal our own joy in that moment. We steal our own joy. Because the joy could be, wow, I am so glad the Dalai Lama's in the world. Oh my God, Buddha. You know, I am so glad my neighbor is kind and quiet and takes nice care of their yard. I'm so glad. I'm so glad that I see people walk on the street with their little dogs and they're just nice to their dogs and they pick up the dog poop. I'm so glad. We deprive ourselves of that joy because we're going around, I don't know about you, but my mind has a habit to go around, why are there so many dogs in Portland? I like cats. I actually think this every day. why are there so many dogs? And why don't they leash their dogs? And why is the person on that side of the sidewalk and the dog's over there and the leash is there and they don't move the dog when I'm walking? Mumble-dee, grumble-dee. Therefore, I steal the joy of my whole walk. Okay, so you get it, right? Okay. So, the point is we can do, and hopefully we'll get to this, the same kind of longer contemplation with loving kindness and compassion and joy as we just did with equanimity. So we'll do just loving kindness at this moment up to lunchtime. So again, take a relaxed posture and relax your mind. Come to your breath is a good way to do that. Come to the breath without manipulating it. That is, you've been breathing the whole time I was talking. Don't change it, it's that same breath. You've been breathing your whole life without thinking about it. It's that same breath. And do a few of those, just letting everything go that feels tense. There are many ways into this meditation, just like with all these, but here's a simple one that I find I can use in even moments while I'm driving or shopping. May I be well. May I be happy. Right in this very moment, may I be well. May I be happy. And you can elaborate on just those two phrases however you want. Like I think. May I have all the support I need in the world to lead a good human life. And may I find a path that leads me to the ultimate happiness, completely free of all suffering. And may this happen for everyone. May there be all the happiness for them that they can possibly have. May this be true for friends and family. May this be true for enemies. May it especially be true for someone who thinks I'm an enemy. May they be happy. May they be at peace. May they be relaxed. May every single being be able to see and experience their connectedness to every other being. May I be able to feel that. May I feel it every moment. And may I be happy when I feel that. May I and all other beings, as far as the limits of space, be happy, abide in loving kindness, and may I help this to occur. Without stressing myself, without exaggerating my capacity, may I help this to occur. May we all be well. May we all be happy in the everyday way and in the ultimate way of understanding our true awakened nature. So what we're hoping in these 2 days is that you get a sense of how to do this practice on your own. And the book will guide you. And we'll talk as the time goes by in the next day and a half of the possibility of breaking out parts of this, doing, some one part each day, etc. So you don't need to feel overwhelmed by how much we've talked about and contemplated and how much more there is to go. So, what we do in our practice here, and it's common in all the lineages of Buddhism, is when we do something that's very, carries positive potential or positive, what's that word you use? Positive momentum. I like that word. Positive momentum, like this morning, coming here, spending time doing this, working with our minds, training our minds towards the end of suffering. Whenever we do these things, and even when you do something, sometimes I have a nice talk with a friend, and when I leave, I say a little prayer. So we call it dedication. It's like giving it an extra oomph. Like I'm paying attention, I just did something good, I'm rejoicing in it, and now I'm going to give it all away to end the suffering of all. So where this is in the book is page 22. I'm just checking if both of our things are the same. Okay, yeah. So page 22, we're going to recite this dedication together. Just do it. Just fasten as you can your mind to each word, just letting the sense of it flow by, okay? By this merit may I attain omniscience. May the enemy wrong action be overcome. From this ocean of existence, the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, may all beings be freed. Not seizing as mine all virtues amassed, I dedicate them to the unsurpassed totality of what is, on behalf of all beings, none excepted. Okay, good. Okay, now we get to have lunch and soup. So I'm going to make a couple of suggestions. If you need to go out, fine. Just stay with, have a little retreat space in your heart here that you stay connected to. And you can also watch how, if you go out, how pulled off you get from that. And that's great practice, seeing the being pulled away into the menu of 20 things to choose from or whatever. If you can stay, that's wonderful. And please help yourself to soup. And is there anything else, Linda? Nothing else, okay. And once you finish, eat in here, eat anywhere you're comfortable, or slightly warm. And afterwards, if you need to rest and even lay down, these little zabutons, these little flat cushions, you can move some cushions off. You can lay down, you can rest, you can sit in the chair. You could go for a walk around the block in silence, walking any pace you want, but perhaps in that walk, sending out to whoever you pass silently this loving kindness. So those are some suggestions of how to spend the time. Please come back by 1:05. Okay? All right. Great. Enjoy.